the 14th of September 2025. I'm Dana. Welcome. 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. And we're going to play this song, Overdiagnosis. It was 10 days ago. And I'll be right back.
They said it's safe, they swore it's clean, but the testing showed what should not be seen. They call it something else. They call it overdiagnosis. That's the phrase they use tonight. Overdiagnosis. But the findings tell what's right. Overdiagnosis. Threefold high and near the zone. Overdiagnosis. Yet they claim it stands alone. 400 cases, screenings off the chart. They said too much testing, don't take it to heart. No baseline study, nowhere else to compare. Just young lives altered while officials stare. Don't check, don't show, keep calm, let go. Overdiagnosis. That's the phrase they use tonight. Overdiagnosis. But the findings tell what's right. Overdiagnosis. They said it's equipped, finding what was there, but children near the plant show a heavier share. Chernobyl's lesson ignored once again. Call it overscreening, but the pattern is there. No link, no blame, same old game. Screenings show what they can't explain. Each new round, the denials remain. Comparisons blocked, the record concealed, but the cancers rise and Fukushima reveals.
It was 356,000 out of a million children all of a sudden. When it used to be 1 in a million, were getting thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters. They just called it overdiagnosis. Imagine being so sadistic. You get a degree as a doctor, and then you sell your soul. And that was in response to a story from a well-known scumbag we've covered here many times. I'm going to play this game now. It doesn't always work. Martin Frackler. Martin Frackler. Should small modular reactors research be diverted to geothermal? Because geothermal actually exists right now, and small modular reactors might never exist. Why put your hopes and dreams into a technology that doesn't exist and that for 70 years they still haven't been able to master? Doesn't it make better sense to put that monetary, that institutions and everything else into a worthy cause, something that has no adverse side effects? Is that crazy talk? Or Martin Frackler, within 1 year or so, there was a public meeting basically in Japan about nuclear. Martin Frackler, I think was New York Times Tokyo bureau chief at the time. I might have a hard time finding it tonight. Not looking good. He had come out and said, what do you do, cover it up? Play it down? Do the exact same thing, right? I can't find that clip right now. What else is new? Let's get after it anyway. We got a lot to get through. I've been trying my best to put a research expedition together, but we only raised less than 100 in the last 20 days. Nuclear industry wins, as usual. I'm just old, man, so it doesn't matter, I guess. Only matters if you're young and sexy and you get the nuclear industry back and you up. So, last couple of weeks we've been noticing another pattern. So this was the video last night, Hanford nuclear site. I had 25 views when the video was over. Show I've been doing for over a decade straight. And then instead of getting like the numbers, the comments and the views and the actual current views and stuff like that and likes and that, I get nothing for about 17, 18, 19 hours on each of my videos. But I looked around on YouTube, nobody else is complaining about it. I had 32 viewers on my show that I've been doing for a decade when the show was over. And the poll I thought was a really good poll. Are you more worried about the 1.5 million, 300,000 gallon tanks they dumped into the soil at Hanford than you are about the 177 tanks they spent tens of billions of dollars trying to come up with a solution for it? Temporary radioactive soil storage site hinders the Fukushima farmers. First off, what are you doing farming in a nuclear wasteland? And radioactive soil storage sites, there was 150,000 of them in 2016. Rice paddy in the foreground serves as a temporary storage site for piles of black plastic bags. These are 1-ton bags, and the minimum is 100,000 atoms per kilogram of cesium-137, just gamma. You've seen this picture, I showed you that picture a lot, but that's where the picture came from, that story in the media saying that instead of the farmers growing food somewhere else where it's not a nuclear wasteland, the media is saying the bags are in the way of the farmers. And so, like, for the average person who doesn't understand the significance of radiation fallout, they might sympathize with the farmers. But the reality of it is these are lunatics. And this is a nuclear wasteland. You can't even live there or stay there. Rumors still blamed for Fukushima food problems, harmful rumors. Like, and when the media puts these pictures up, is that harmful rumor? Or they're trying to make people complacent by showing it to them. The story is insane. It's just, How does the industry become so sadistic? So this story showed up. This was a 2022 story. And when you see these stories showing up in the search engine for a 24-hour news cycle, it means they edited the story. Most likely they took something out of the story. 11 years later, fate of Fukushima reactor cleanup uncertain. 11 years later, the fate of the reactor cleanup. Japan announced the cooling system restored the fuel pools number 1 to 4 in 2011. In 2013, 2012 basically, right here, the fuel pools would be at the very top of the building, which doesn't exist. It should be a 19-story, 190-foot building. So this industry, the people in it, the lunatics, these are lunatics. The nuclear industry is just pure lunatics. Arrogant, hateful, and out to kill us. That's what the people in the nuclear industry are best described as. 11 years later, the fate of Fukushima reactor cleanup is uncertain. Like, you can't clean up something that is already gone, and you won't acknowledge it. A lab technician used a pair of smart glasses. Wow, 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 wow. I'm just mind-boggled. As she demonstrates a part of a process to measure levels of tritium. So that story was meant to make you think that this never happened. Same as the media pretending they're at the top of the building was meant to make you think that this never happened. Why are they doing that? Why is the media's pretending they're at a building that doesn't exist? What possibly could be a catalyst for something like that? Why risk their reputations and everything else? And they were pretty sure nobody was going to call them out on it, because they all done it. All the media universities participated in that lie. This story kind of confused me originally. Japan Environment Minister, which is the guy with his two hands held out there, wants his country to stop nuclear energy in today's memory, September the 12th, 2019. The story came out 2 days ago. I was looking back. This is one of 150,000 sites of one-ton bags in Japan of radiation fallout that was picked up in order to make people complacent and so they can grow food in a nuclear wasteland and poison everybody worldwide, I guess. It doesn't make any sense, the stuff they're doing. It's completely stupid. You can't grow food in a nuclear wasteland because the people that eat it get sick and die. And so I was out on the trail on my big bike, which is designed for that stuff, right? And one of the big problems with that bike is I don't have a crash guard, which is going to get me caught out eventually. And I felt that big sneeze. I knew it was only going to be one. I figured out the best way to clean my glasses. You love this. This is amazing. If you got glasses, you should try this right away. You ever get grease and all kinds of stuff on your glasses, and you get all the spray, and you buy all the fancy cloths and everything? Nothing really works, does it? There actually is one thing that works every time. It's like this. The enzymes in your breath will take all the grease off the glass. How crazy is that? The enzyme actually works. But anyway, I have luggage racks on my bike, my big bike. And there's pouches there. So I have my glasses in the pouches. And I got out of the pouch and I have my big cameras in the pouch in one of the right-hand side. And I scratched the shit out of my glasses. That was very disappointing. was heartbreaking, actually. But that's the way it is. I'm not the nuclear industry, so I got to deal with it the hard way. Japanese politicians who had served as the Minister of Environment, 2019-2021, is now the Minister of Agriculture, the guy with his hands out. And so his quote we're going to read here, and that was from 6 years ago, September 12, 2019. The Minister of the Japanese Environment, Kozimi, who we've covered quite a lot, unfortunately, wants his country to stop using nuclear power plants. He considers the energy to be efficient, but the danger is also extraordinary. He's the second from the left with his hands out. The fact that they do this is just unconscionable. It's unconscionable. And the danger is also extraordinary. You have no idea. I mean, these people died that day, or within an hour of that picture. They're spraying a reagent on the fuel particulates and pellets that landed all over the site. That's meant to bind with, that reagent is meant to bind with fuel particles, which are splitting atoms, to stop the atoms from the mass production, right? To contain it a little bit. So anybody who's got that job wearing a paper suit will die. Those 3 people died that day for sure. Not maybe, not perhaps, but for sure. The Japanese government is indeed worried that Fukushima will become a mass grave like Chernobyl. At that time, they're talking about Chernobyl, 50 rescue workers died from acute radiation. Like, they were sending people out on the roof for 25 seconds. They were jacking them off the street at gunpoint with buses. There was almost 1 million of them. And they bring them in there. They had to run out and pick up a piece of actual fuel and throw it off the roof. These people would have had debilitating illnesses for the rest of their life if they didn't die from it right away. 4,000 children and adolescents were affected by thyroid cancers. And so they want you to believe thyroid is the only health effect besides, well, the only health effect, that's the only one they acknowledge, is thyroid cancers. 9 of whom died. So they're saying only 9 people died from Chernobyl. The babies, like, these are her pictures. These are babies from Chernobyl, children from Chernobyl that have been abandoned. And there's endless orphanages of abandoned children. There's over 6,000 children needed open heart surgery, or I'm sorry, that was paid for by a foundation in the United Kingdom. These children you're looking at are all abandoned. Chernobyl is just unbelievable. It's just really something. Suggesting only 9 people died at Chernobyl is just surreal. You really got to be some kind of sick and demented and twisted, hateful scum to suggest that. I'm just going to go through like 20 studies of just the babies. Influence of post-Chernobyl fallout and birth defects, abortion rates in Austria. Why are you doing studies like that, I wonder? Trends in human sex odds at birth in Europe after the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, radioactive fallout. Chernobyl prenatal loss of 400 male fetuses in the Czech Republic. Secondary sex ratio and trends in associated gender-specific births near nuclear facilities, France and Germany. So they're looking for more males than females. Cycles, and they're going to find it too after nuclear accidents. And they've done all of Europe after Chernobyl, by the way. And what it means, though, is less population. And so if it's happening to the humans, which it clearly was, it's going to be much more pronounced in the species. Which means you're going to see a precipitous population drop immediately in the next couple of years following any kind of a nuclear accident of all species. Non-thyroid cancers, very rare for them to even acknowledge that is even possible. The Congenital Abnormality Registry in Belarus, a tool for assessing the public health. Let me go back for 1 second. Oh, yeah. Cancer incidences in Finland. Down syndrome in Belarus after Chernobyl. Non-thyroid cancers in Belarusian. Prenatal mortality, England and Wales after Chernobyl, 3,000 kilometers away. Chromosome aberration in Norwegian reindeer fallen. You know, Chernobyl, they studied every species, every single species, bacteria, fungus included. Here's an interesting study. Estimated lifetime effective dose to hunters and their families in the 3 most contaminated counties in Sweden. They actually closed the freshwater fish in Sweden for 30 years after Chernobyl. It still should be closed today. Geraldine Thomas, who should be in jail for the rest of her life, eh? What an evil, evil person. Incidents of illegal abortions in Sweden after Chernobyl. So Chernobyl wasn't just 9 people dying, and anybody, which is the United Nations disgusting parasites narrative. But you get the effects, like they know everything about radiation fallout, and they know it's catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. Fukushima contaminated soil. There's 105,000 storage sites in 2019. That's the same year that the agricultural minister had made that statement from that story we started off with here. Plain past the partial 2016 was 30 million tons of radioactive waste. This was the topsoil in bags, meaning the waste had to be repackaged regularly because the bags deteriorated after 3 years. So they were talking about 30 million one-ton bags. You can go read the story. 30 million. Imagine growing food in a nuclear wasteland to sell it to the population. They never stop doing it, eh? Imagine how sadistic and demented and how crazy the industry got to be to sit back and allow that to happen. They are out to murder us worldwide. Mont-Bell opens a comfortable campsite in a nuclear wasteland in the Fukushima Prefecture. This is absurdness. In the mountains that they could never pick up any bags. The story doesn't even make sense. So they were talking about that dam and that lake. So when I found out, I knew for sure I had the right spot. Which was just, it's close, it's like, it's before Koriyama. Koriyama, the schools are filling up water bottles and stacking them inside and outside the classroom to try to shield the students from radiation rather than moving them out of that area. This is the neptunium, which decays to plutonium after 2.5 days. The model is based on 20 days. So the radioactive fallout covers the whole planet in 20 days of plutonium, for goodness sakes. And the model is only based on a fraction of the actual inventories that were lost. Sellafield, United Kingdom, man. They're really something. The United Kingdom nuclear industry is, well, they're like Canada. Well, Canada's like them, I should say, and so is Australia. But these are the weasels of weasels we've ever come across. The pro-nuclear community from the United Kingdom are criminal in every sense of the word. And that you would have no problem getting a conviction if it wasn't illegal. If it was illegal to poison you with radiation, it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Only the regulatory agency has the authority. Congress and Parliament does not have the authority. And that's a recipe for genocide. So the Japanese and Sellafield, they traveled down to Sellafield. These are lunatics, is the best way to describe these people. A nuclear decommissioning agreement is set to continue for up to another decade. They've already had an agreement for a decade. The whole story is absurd. An extended cooperation agreement that began in 2014. Remember 2014? When the media said they were on top of reactor 4. That's 2014 right there. These people are insane. They're actually insane, what these people do, and the cover-up that they constantly participate in, resulted in irreparable damage to the typical I thought it was a nuclear meltdown. How can you call it irreparable damage? It's just worthless scum, boy. You people are just worthless scum. Oh, no, it's not a meltdown. It's irreparable damage, Dana. It'd be irreparable damage if I catch you by the back of your head for a second with a baseball bat in a different dimension. Resulted in irreparable damage. Like if you only got one nuclear meltdown, you can't get near the other reactors. You had 4 in a row. And at the top of them were decades of reactor cores and the fuel pools, and you lost all of that inventories. You're just disgusting parasites on humanity. That's what you people actually are. The agreement enables sharing of operational and technical knowledge to support decommissioning progress. What are you talking about? Operational and technical knowledge. What technical knowledge? What are you talking about? You can't, there's nobody on the planet, there's no government agencies, there's no corporations. Like they're using the words that they're using, decommissioning. Yeah, try decommissioning the dead whales that wash up. Look at this killer whale. It's like a deflated balloon or something. The shoulder blade's sticking up. It's got a peanut head. The rib cages are sticking out. It has no blubber, no muscle mass whatsoever. Completely emaciation, starving. It starved to death, but it also died of cancer, severe cancer, because it bioaccumulated so much radiation per kilogram. The early estimates would be within 3 years, they'd be looking at about 1,000 atoms per kilogram for the killer whales, for instance. It's much worse than that. Hutton, the chief executive of the worst nuclear wasteland in Europe, Sellafield, said very few places in the world have decommissioning challenges akin to those at Sellafield. Decommissioning challenges. Like you just threw stuff in fuel pools and left it there till the people that put it there died, so nobody even knows what's in the pools. You have 1,000 buildings on that site that are nuclear wastelands, for goodness sakes. And that you're surrounded by farms as far as you can see, and you had a nuclear meltdown in 1957 at the reactor, plutonium mixed oxide reactor, number 4, right? You'll never decommission it. And you poisoned how many hundreds of millions of people from the farms? Like if you look at Sellafield from a satellite, let me see if I can find it. It's just... We've never seen a redeeming quality in the nuclear industry. Nothing. The only way you can describe the nuclear industry is savages and serial killers. I guess here's the pictures of Sellafield, England coming up. That's a satellite picture of Sellafield over there. There's actually 1,000 buildings there. And they took fuel from all over the world and all over the United Kingdom and reprocessed it at that site, which meant the releases were astronomical. In fact, Sellafield in La Hague, and Donerae in Scotland, and another reprocessing site in France, besides La Hague, are considered responsible for poisoning the Arctic and all the species. So when you look at Sellafield from a satellite, what do you see? You see farms in every direction, except for the ocean, which is even scarier again. The idea of that was the radioactive fallout would be moved out of the area by the farms, and that would poison people worldwide. That's every nuclear power plant and every fuel site has that particular attribute. Do you realize what they're actually doing to you? And they got the law to the point where it's not illegal to poison you, so you can never hold them accountable for what they're doing. They've worked very hard to put themselves in that position, and it wasn't an accident that almost every single nuclear plant on the planet is surrounded by farms. It's evil on a level that we have no comparison. By working together with TEPCO, Sellafield says we can unlock new technology. Yeah, new technology. But once you start by fixing all the children with the plutonium teeth, is this the new technology you're unlocking where you're pretending you're on top of reactor 3? That's Rupert Winfield Hayes from United Kingdom, where Sellafield is too. New technology. Here's what they spent $48 million. And it took them 5 years to build this robot. This is a robot. And all it does is it reaches out there, and it has a set of tongs. And his idea was to go down and bring up a little tiny, like less than a gram. James Lucid actually wrote a song about it. Less than a gram. And it's a really good song, by the way. And all he had to do was put duct tape on it, right? Cover that in duct tape, two-sided duct tape. Lower it down, they would have got a quarter pound of samples instead of spending 5 years trying to get a gram. These are scumbags. This industry is pure scumbags. And they're working on technology that is from the 40s, from the Enrico Fermi. There's nobody in the nuclear industry with innovation, right? They're not coming up with their own designs. Every design they're doing is based on the old designs. The Antarctic. Yeah, right. Russia's got 18,000 dumps in the Antarctic. France and the United Kingdom poisoned the Arctic. It's inspiring to hear the progress being made over there. What progress are you talking about? Right, the stump, they put that over the stump of reactor 3. That's what it looks like underneath it. That's what it looked like originally. They stripped it down. They put this contraption, they built it off-site and then with cranes, remote-controlled cranes, assemble it. Toshiba should be sued for what they done, pretending that they're decommissioning. And they got pretending the media, Rupert Winfield Hayes right there in that picture from the United Kingdom, pretending they're on top of reactor 3 that actually doesn't even exist. And they've done the same thing at reactor 4, and that's Rupert Winfield Hayes up in the corner again. We have many similar challenges. Do you really? You have nothing similar to Fukushima, I can assure you that much. The cooperation data has been a major force in advancing the decommissioning work. This is their decommissioning work where they have a media pretending they're on top of a building that doesn't even exist. That's what they mean by that. They really are the most worthless humans conceivable. Furthermore, by sharing Japan's efforts and achievements, we have built a relationship of mutual learning. Learning the law and commit genocide and omnicide. Radioactive rain caused 130 schools in Korea to close after Fukushima. And radioactive rain caused Taiwan to tell people to stay home and get rid of their clothing and scrub and wash for hours. A bear breaks into northeastern Japan's nursing home, probably because it's starving to death and it has radiation poisoning. The animal fled without injuring residents or staff at the facility, Fukushima Prefecture. The Fukushima Prefecture has an epidemic of bear attacks now too. The town set off fireworks and placed traps in the area. The people shouldn't even be there in the first place. It's a nuclear wasteland, for goodness sakes. Beer sightings have risen to a record in Fukushima Prefecture. I guess so many shows, pack each, this year alone that I can't seem to get to. I'm always working, it's just you don't have enough time to do the shows, right? Top radiation experts, 50 atoms a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. It's going to be the same for animals. Except for animals, it's going to be even worse because they're out in the gamma shine 24/7. They can't get away from it. The neutrons and the betas and the alphas and gammas. The hidden cost of nuclear power, radioactivity in the air. This was about the Nova Scotia Point La Hague site. A United Nations initiative to strengthen global cooperation in improving air quality and reducing pollution. Why would you give a shit about what United Nations has to say, first off? They don't have any sovereignty over any country. They're structured the same as McDonald's or Walmart or whatever. They're not a regulatory agency. They can't compel anybody. They can't, they're like a consultant at best. Yet they've taken over 195 of the biggest countries worldwide. They call them the New World Order, right? Point Le Pure, which is what they're talking about in that story, legally releases 16,400,000 trillion airborne and liquid, vapor and liquid, atoms of tritium a year. This is like a massive event. If you look at Sizewell releases 8 trillion. Just a single reactor in Canada. The Canadian reactors, if you look at all the Canadian reactors at the top there, they release more tritium into the environment each year than all the reactors worldwide it does in their lifetime combined. Canada releases each year. And all the Canadian reactors, except for the Point Le Pure, which is on the east coast of Canada, in Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick rather, all the other ones in Canada are on the Great Lakes, the third biggest aquifer on the entire planet of fresh water. I mean, the numbers we're talking about there is catastrophic numbers. The CANDU reactors shouldn't be allowed to exist under any circumstances. The best way to describe them are disease factories. What they do in one day is catastrophic. What they do 365 days a year is unconscionable. This year, the timing is especially significant for New Brunswick. The Standing Committee on Climate Change Environmental Stewardship, which is a UN gig, right? UN is the one who's pushing the climate change narrative to cover up the 80 years of emission from the nuclear industry, which is what the real climate change is actually should be pointed at. Canada releases just a single reactor more than all the reactors on the planet combined. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Compared to other OECD nations, Canada consistently ranks among the 3 worst industrial countries for per capita emissions of sulfur, nitrogen, volatile organic compounds, carbon dioxide, and greenhouse gases. Canada had to remove all air quality standards so they could run their reactors. Otherwise, they couldn't run their reactors. Canada does not have legally binding national air quality standards, because if they did, they have to close all the nuclear plants in Canada. I mean, when you look at what each nuclear plant in Canada does, these are like a massive accident every year at each plant in releases. And I'm telling you right now, it ain't just tritium, 3H. New Brunswick has long taken a permissive stance towards pollutant industries. These include the nuclear industry, which continues to market itself as clean and green. How can you call anything that does that clean and green? And if you go back, if you look up tritium, Canada tritium on my site, there's a 3-hour presentation on the tritium, and I walk you right through that horror story. That's a horror story. That destroys the health of everybody in Canada and everybody who drinks at the Great Lakes, which also, right, serves water supply for just thousands and thousands of farms, both in the United States and Canada, and drinking water for the United States and Canada. In reality, the industry produces toxic radioactive emissions during reactor operations. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day from all of these sites. There's no containment. In other parts of the country, the nuclear fuel cycle also contributes to air pollution through uranium mining, milling, enrichment, radioactive dust, heavy metals, greenhouse gases, etc. But what they're omitting is the fact of the nuclear fuel pools. The nuclear fuel pools each of them boil about 120,000 liters a day. They're not filled with water as much as they're filled with a specific, specialized type of water each day. It's a borated, demineralized water. And they say it provides radiation shielding and cooling. You know what? The reason they need cooling is because they're splitting atoms. So the atoms can't stay there. The atoms are released directly into the environment, see? All day, every day, from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. I mean, they look pretty harmless, don't they? You see people up there stood on the walkway up there, the fuel machines. But the reality of it is, the emission from the fuel pools is catastrophic. And that's the reason why every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. The fuel is still splitting atoms. It can't just continuously stay in the water, right? It's evaporating 120,000 liters a day because it's so hot. And he said the water helps to prevent the release of radioactive materials into the environment. That's simply not true. There's 120,000 liters in each fuel pool, and there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. Each fuel pool is boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. Each liter is hundreds of trillions of man-made isotopes, and just a single one will eventually cause you to get sick, and eventually after that will cause you to die from that exposure. Or birds, or mammals, or animals, or etc., any species, right? Compared to other nuclear power plants in Canada, the tritium, which should be called tritium-3H, emissions are notably high, approximately 4 times greater than those from Darlington. Yeah, but Darlington is brutal. Almost 850,000 trillion atoms a year legally. It's 16 times more, actually, Point-Lepreau is, which is 16,400,000 trillion atoms a year legally, even though it should never be legal. The reason it's legal is because they can't contain it. The industry is insane. It's fixated on genocide and omnicide. Its whole ideology is based on omnicide and genocide. In fact, the Canadian reactors, the CANDU reactors, as a whole emit more tritium than their counterparts in US or Europe, well, more than the entire planet combined. In 2020 alone, Point-Lepreau released 290 trillion atoms of tritium into the atmosphere. No. It releases each year legally around 16,400,000 trillion atoms. Who knows how much is really released? They can't contain it. It's tritium, see? Tritium, so any rainwater landing on a site becomes tritiated on top of that, for instance. And Canada has a lot of rainwater, a lot of snow, and that melts, right? Ends up typically into the Atlantic. All of that becomes tritiated at the site. Every nuclear site has that particular attribute. And within 100 square miles, any rainfall becomes tritiated of any nuclear power plant, because the whole at least 100 square miles are heavily contaminated with radioactive fallout. NANO Nuclear CleanSpark lead the Bull Strangle watch list for this next week. Nano gets a lot of because they were created by former government employees from the Department of Energy, who seen a little niche to get out and steal billions of dollars from the unsuspecting investors. And they're propped up by the 14 biggest financial institutions on the planet as of Conference of Parties 28. And what they'll do is they'll buy stocks, not just NANO, but other companies, the so-called small modular reactor, and artificially inflate the stocks. And they'll buy like 6-7 million stocks. And so the unsuspecting investor sees the stocks climbing, throws their hard-earned money into it, and 3 weeks later, the bottom comes out. This is a rinse and repeat cycle for that particular stock ever since it existed. It doesn't have a product, so it shouldn't even be on the stock market on top of that. But it gets all this airtime from the media and from the stock market. And it's meant to loot the unsuspecting investors to prop up the non-small modular reactor industry. And they're not going to be small modular reactors in conventional what people would. The Canadian boiling water reactor X300 in New Brunswick that they're planning on building is 35 meters up and 38 meters below ground. It's 10 stories up and 11 stories down. That's 21-story building, 73 meters. It's about a 240-foot building, actually. How is that a small modular reactor? It's a 240-foot building, ultimately. That's my depiction of what it would look like. You're supposed to be able to move it anywhere with a transport truck, right? And this is how many transport trucks you're going to need to move the Canadian small. The Canadian small modular reactor has nothing to do with small. It's bigger than the Fukushima reactors. North Korea to boost a nuclear arsenal. Now, I done a show last night, which only got a little over 100 views. They just hate me, eh? But I got no one to pick on, so might as well kick the shit out of me every fucking day. That's what they do to me every day, to kick the shit out of me. This nuclear industry does. Hey, let's go shit on Dana again today. That's what they do to me. They kick the shit out of me every single day. And the nuclear industry, if you took everybody in the nuclear industry and put them together and added up their worth, it would be equal to a cockroach. North Korea to boost nuclear arsenal. We done a whole presentation on that last night. And on Hanford. Very important. It's a very important video that got absolutely curb stomped by the nuclear industry and shit tube. Government announced $12 billion upgrade for nuclear submarine base in Australia. It's hilarious. Australia, about 20 years ago, the United States set up a military base there, and immediately there was all kinds of brothels of very young, underage females, and there's a whole bunch of underage females immediately went missing all across Australia. And now they have the 7 biggest weapons producers in Australia, and they demand billions of dollars a year. They don't set up unless they're going to make billions of dollars. Like the Hellfire missile that Martin Grumman produced, they produced around $10 billion. He sold over 100,000 of them or something like that. So if I start up a company that makes $10 billion, that's a pretty good company, right? So just one of their missiles produced over $10 billion in sales. It's a pretty good company, see? On the stock market, you'll never get rid of them on top of that. That's how they insulate themselves. They put themselves in the stock market, and then they work with corporate personhood, which is an illegal amendment to the American Constitution, the Canadian Bill of Rights, and the United Kingdom Magna Carta. A $12 billion upgrade for nuclear submarine base so the Americans, the British, the French can bring their submarines there too. Australia, by law, it's illegal to have a nuclear power plant in Australia. By law, it's baked into into their constitution, so to speak. Baked into their constitution. Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister announces that the crucial Henderson submarine base in Western Australia will get $12 billion upgrade. Australia is disgusting, eh? The pro-nuclear community in Australia is just despicable. None of them are as bad as the Canadian, though. I got to give them credit. They're pretty evil. Don't get me wrong. It's pretty hard to be more evil than the Canadian nuclear industry. The Canadian nuclear industry is just the lowest forms of life conceivable. The bottom feeders of sewage tanks is basically where they came from. France has got rid of another prime minister. France is a unique country that has a president and a prime minister. And so the president don't take the fall for anything. The prime minister does. So in 2 years, they've gone through 5 prime ministers or 6. They're worse than Japan, sure. I'm worn out, eh? I'm just worn out. And some people might think I took last week off. Don't think for a second. I should have just done shows all week because I beat the shit out of myself last week. Trying to do something good for this plant. I don't know how to give up. It's a fatal flaw for Dana, unfortunately. It's good for the planet, fortunately. It turns out just breathing on your glasses is way better than putting liquid. Right? It does a much better job of removing the grease. Right? You know, you can go get all the sprays to spray your glasses. But the best thing to do is just the steam from your breath. It does a much better job. I absolutely despise the Australian government. Brussels' approval of funding for Hungary's Rosatom project struck down by the EU court. There goes another 2 nuclear power plants off the pipe dream. Right, because they were going to build 2 nuclear power plants. Now they can't. China's deadly nuclear-capable ICBM with 20,000 kilometer range and can carry 10 nuclear warheads at the one time. Is capable of trouble. Yeah, well said, shit for brains. Carries 10 nuclear warheads, does it? What possibly could be the catalyst for using? And remember, just a couple of people got the authority to push that button. So you have no control over your planet whatsoever. With this shit for brains, lunatic industry on it. You have no hope for a future anyway because of Fukushima. Ultra long-range intercontinental ballistic missile that carries 10 nuclear warheads, which could be many megatons, by the way, which reportedly has a range of over 20,000 kilometers, making it capable of striking anywhere on the planet. Nuclear industry, no matter what, nuclear industry always wins. Right? It always gets all the money it ever wants. It gets everything it ever wants. It needs a few $1 billion to build a outdoor toilet. They'll be like, no one's going to question them. There you go. Here's $2 billion. Have a nice day. Do you need any more? No, we don't need no more hospitals in our country. You come first. You're the nuclear industry. Lee Dungan. I sent him an email anyway. Dear shit for brains. Some enormous amount of soil, salt soil. What the hell is this? Why would you put the word salt soil? Some enormous amount of soil. It was 30 million one-ton bags of radioactive fallout picked up. They're calling it salt soil in this story. Collected during the process of some of the enormous amount of soil, decontaminating radioactive material, they call it salt soil. Like some radiation is described as a salt, which is true, right? It's put into that category, but it's man-made elements. It's got nothing to do with salt. It's just meant to confuse you, and it's very effective at doing that. Collected during the process of decontaminating radioactive material. Leaked. Yeah, really, 30 million one-ton bags is considered a leak, eh? Is there any hope for this planet at all? Oh, that's some good news there. James put out another song. Make sure you give him the likes, folks, on these videos. You got any idea how hard he works? He's over 400 now. It's so absurd, but that's an amazing accomplishment. I don't care who it is. That's an amazing accomplishment. It's like it's unbelievable that somebody can do that. We're brought into a flower bed for the government ministries in downtown Tokyo. So therefore, it's all, oh, they use it on a flower bed. Honey, we should go get a few tons of that for our garden. On the 14th of November, they injected about 45 cubic meters of decontamination soil. You can't decontaminate soil. You can't decontaminate anything that's radioactive. It's like trying to reverse like if you take a screwdriver and magnetize it, you can't reverse it. But it's harmless, so you don't give a shit, right? You're a pain in the ass sometimes if there's too much magnetism. But this is radiation, what we're actually talking about. There's no tiny amount that is not harmful. And in Japan, there's no such thing as a tiny amount. Like they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, which was just 3% of the farmland and a few communities they wanted complacent people to move back into. And look at this decontamination. I think it was 7 times or something it showed up. Yeah, 7 times. Decontamination soil. So they were pushing that narrative very hard, weren't they? It was peeled off during decontamination work in surrounding houses and farmland, that they never stopped growing food in, by the way. These people are insane. And this planet is insane, not to hold them accountable. Like, it's our job to hold this industry accountable. This stuff is deadly right away and forever. And so we got to get after it. I'm busy, but I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have other people out there doing this too. I know that sounds crazy, but if you had 10 or 20 people out there doing what I'm doing, just talking about the industry would just fall apart. It would lose its mind, actually. They would hire another 2,000 public relation firms just to counter you. Work on surrounding houses. You can't decontaminate a house or farmland, my goodness. And farmland. And he said, currently the amount of soil stored is 14 million cubic meters. Where did the other 16 million cubic meters go to? We don't know what happened to the other 60 million one-ton bags of radiation. You're talking about an absurd amount of radiation. You're talking about 2 rows of traffic around the entire planet. This is an absurd amount of radiation. What did they do with it? U.S. will have access to Western Australia's nuclear submarine shipyard. And so will the United Kingdom, so will France. And my name's not Richard Marles, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister. Why is it when you put these particular people in these jobs, you'll cut everybody's throat on the planet and wearing a $5,000 suit? Facility to receive rotations in the United States, United Kingdom vessels. Don't think for a second France is not going to get their little weasel head in there. aims to provide Australia with attack submarines for the next decade to counter Chinese ambitions in the Indo-Pacific region. This is how they sold it, right? There's over $300 billion. So the Australians, who are just suffering from inflation, suffering from no power, suffering from no medical or health care or help for the communities, are going to waste $300 billion on the nuclear industry because the 7 biggest weapons out of the 10 biggest weapons producers have set up shop there, and they just buy off all the politicians and pass that bill. After a couple of years, they got so much blackmail on the politicians. The Jeffrey Epsteins are down there too, I can assure you. We'll also build a new landing craft for the Australian Army. Like, the Australian Army is laughable. It really is. They were never meant to ever go to war. Australia was, they disarmed that country a long time ago. Locals can't even have any kind of weapons whatsoever. And then they just molded everybody. What they done, if you look at what they done down there, say in the last 5 years to the population, that's evil. It's unbelievably evil what they done. And if you look at what the British done to them, took their nuclear weapons and went down to Australia, Maralinga, Mont-Bell, and set off their nuclear weapons down there. And they waited for the wind to blow across Australia. They had like 50 airplanes would go out before nuclear testing to figure out how the wind was going to blow the radiation. So they absolutely, unequivocally knew what they were doing. There's zero possibility anybody can legally claim they didn't know it was going to blow over Australia when they had that kind of manpower at their disposal every time. They also, on land, set off over 700 dirty bombs. One of them was like 50 kilograms of plutonium, where they just wrapped it in conventional weapons and detonated it. And we have these testimonies from the scientists whose job was to go out with Geiger counters and find it. Like, it's evil on a level that we don't have anything else on this planet to compare it to. Like, we actually don't have anything else on the planet we can compare it to. Under AUKUS, the stupid, we're at over $340 billion, I think it is. I'm sure that'll climb. Nuclear industry never come in on budget ever in their entire life. What does Japan's disaster mean for the global nuclear industry? This was March the 16th, 2011. So why did that story show up today in the search engine? Because they went in and changed the story. That's why it would show up. This was the perpetually despicable CNN, March the 16th. It means, so instead of worrying about radioactive fallout in the communities and the people nearby, they're, well, what's going to happen to the nuclear industry worldwide? Worthless humans, man. Why is it that almost everybody we see connected to the nuclear industry is just a worthless scum of the earth? In a $5,000 suit and dirty underwear, of course, but a worthless, despicable scum. Why is that? And this is not conjecture and opinion or something. This is documented. My glasses are destroyed. I scratched the shit out of it. They got it out of the pocket, ended up down by the camera. And if you know my camera and my gimbal, right? My camera's got a cage around it and steel, and it scratched the shit out of my glasses. It was a good thing I had stopped when I stopped. At least it didn't, like, it's pretty rough, man. It's pretty rough. I'm just heartbroken. And we're in the fall down here, even though it's still summer. It's like fall. My plan is to try to do some research expeditions. I shouldn't even say nothing, I suppose, because the nuclear industry is going to be all over me now. Well, we got to get out and do some field studies before fall sets in. There's 46 million migratory birds missing, right? Among everything else, the birds and the bees and the insects and everything. Raising concern about the safety of nuclear industry, nuclear energy. Well, there is no safety in the nuclear industry. Once you take the fuel out of the reactor core the first time, you turn it into a perpetual disease factory because it's still splitting atoms for millions of years, and you're putting it into a pool where the atoms now are released through evaporation of water, right? The water soaks up all the radioactive atoms, and the atoms will boil the water like it always does. And then as it boils out 120,000 liters a day, which is an absurd amount per fuel pool, there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. It's the perfect weapon because you can't perceive it, right? You can't smell it or see it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or perceive it. Is it time to stop relying on nuclear power? Nuclear power shouldn't exist. Right? And if there was any checks and balances whatsoever, the nuclear industry couldn't exist. And so they used IAEA as their checks and balances, the nuclear watchdog. They're also the promoter of nuclear industry. They can't do both. And that's what they're doing. They're the most dishonest and disgusting and genocidal, omnicidal people you're ever going to meet is UN. The ERPA, the UNSCLEAR, the IPRC, IAEA, they're all the same people on each one of those committees. It's the same people. CNN asked experts on the issue for their thoughts on what will happen next and the lesson we can learn from the accident. Professor Paul Elkins. Must never forget nuclear power is potentially a very dangerous way of generating electricity, though there are industries which have killed more people on a regular basis, not least as mining and coal. No, nothing touches nuclear. The fuel from the fuel pools are hemorrhaging now, and they're surrounded by farms as far as you can see, like I showed you, Sellafield. And so everybody eats that, eventually gets sick from it and dies. Everybody, no exceptions. They have debilitating health issues, heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism. We're seeing dementia in 1 and 2 year olds now in Australia. I guess they're getting all their milk now from Fukushima Prefecture, same as United Kingdom. United Kingdom removed the restrictions on baby food and cereal, which is what children eat, 2 years before it removed restrictions on the food for the adults from Fukushima nuclear wasteland. Do you got any idea how sadistic that actually is? How evil, how unbelievably, monstrously evil that is? It's hideously evil, what we're talking about. We don't have anything else on the planet to compare it to. It's evil on a level that I don't know how anybody can sit in good conscience and not say something, speak up about this industry. I don't know how that works. Like what I do every day is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And then to come here and sit here at nighttime and try to tell the story is madness. But just reading all this every day, this is a nightmare. Right? This affects you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is like wallowing in this excrement all day and all night. I can't ignore the harmful effects that unfortunately I know way too well, and that you're seeing them manifest everywhere. We must never forget that nuclear power is potentially a very dangerous way, but you can't say, look, if you took gas, oil, and coal emissions, is carbon. That's more birds, more insects, more puppies, more people, more animals, more plants, more trees, more fruit, more vegetables, more biota. carbon's good for you, right? Carbon's natural cycle of life. But the emissions from the nuclear industry destroy everything with replicating cells. And so that's a very dishonest statement that, as usual, and he's from the London Energy Institute, which is even, if you're from London and you're a professor, you pretty well have no credibility whatsoever. If you're from Canada, and you're a professor, you have no credibility. Same thing for the States and every other country. Like, we've covered thousands and thousands and thousands of professors. And there's a couple, right, that, spoke out, but that was it, right? Energy Environment Policy Specialist. And then he says nuclear is not the worst. Well, nuclear clearly is the worst. There have been big accidents in the past. We have learned lessons from them. You didn't learn the right lesson that they shouldn't exist. No big nuclear accidents since Chernobyl. Like, a fuel pool's emissions, 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging all day into the environment is way worse than Chernobyl. And Chernobyl, not to downplay Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom after Chernobyl. Think about that statement. 9,400 farms were closed after Chernobyl. 3,000 kilometers away. Nuclear power is difficult, potentially dangerous form of electricity generation. So if you don't have to go down that route, it's probably better that you don't. But, first you have to apologize for the nuclear industry and say it's not the worst industry. But you don't see him saying, well, I got to get rid of this one, I got to get rid of that one. He's talking about nuclear. And the potential danger is that the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into your environment 24 hours a day. Undoubtedly, the popular perception of nuclear power will take a knock in the wake of this. Nuclear will take a knock. Not for very long. Just wait till everybody went back to sleep and they found lots of reasons. I mean, the first year, first off, like, the biggest construction site on the planet ever is Hinkley Point. And they're calling this carbon-free. It's the biggest construction site in history. And they're calling it carbon-free. Like, the electricity that it uses every day, I like to see that bill. Everything is triply inspected. This is only half the site at best. They need 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to a nuclear site to operate the site. Just to build it, to operate it, and to decommission it eventually. If that's not a very good word by rights. The word decommissioning doesn't belong in it. It's just, you already polluted the entire planet. And so think each reactor itself, and they got multiple reactors on the site, but each reactor, each day, needs 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water. So how much energy do you need to move 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water each day? Because that's the only way I can really describe how much water we're talking about. Because if I give you a volume, for most people, it means nothing to them. So if I tell you that in a 24-hour period, each reactor, and you have, say, 4 or 6 reactors on these sites, each reactor is going to need a minimum of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks every minute. Needs 70 every second. How much energy do you have to use to produce that kind of water? And then each glass of water from the ocean would have 1 billion creatures. Right? And there's 4 in a liter, and there's 4 liters in a gallon, and there's 1 million gallons a minute. And you're talking about eggs and larvae and small fries annihilated in over 400 different sites worldwide each day. And the amount we're talking about is catastrophic amounts of killing going on in the most important species, the nurseries, right? These are genocide machines. And then the emissions from the fuel pools are catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. So that's Hinkley Point. There's enough cement there to build a sidewalk all the way to Rome. And they call it carbon-free for some reason. These are lunatics, eh? Like each reactor needs 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water, 1,000 liters each minute, each 24 hours. Like this is not carbon-free. This is the most resource-intensive industry in human history, period, bar nothing. We will have to wait and see how the current situation will work out to see the impacts on the image of nuclear power. If there is a catastrophic nuclear meltdown, of course there is. This is March the 16th, remember? But this is March the 15th. 4 reactors melted down in a row, and 8 fuel pools with an assumed total capacity of 36 reactor cores melted down. And each of these reactor cores are massive, pure uranium, pure plutonium. So when in comparison, Chernobyl was a small reactor, was a brand new reactor, was a graphite reactor. Each one of these reactors is equal to about 100 Chernobyls in inventories. And there's around 36 reactor cores, around 3,600 Chernobyls. Previous disasters, like the ones at Chernobyl at 3 Mile Island, had huge international ramifications. Well, 3 Mile Island, there was a concession made to put about 150 sirens around each nuclear power plant within 10 miles. So people can be evacuated. They've never used them. They've had many accidents. They have no intentions of using them. And when they were used, they came out after immediately and said it was an accident, even though clearly it wasn't an accident. Because the checks and balances to get the sirens to go off, there's like 6 different levels of command that has to go through before that can happen. Right, the nuclear industry, was over 100 reactors canceled after 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island, Dick Thornburg, who was the new governor at that time in Pennsylvania, 2 months on the job, knew nothing about nuclear, and he refused at the request of the nuclear industry to evacuate because that would be a major black eye for the nuclear industry. And they were already now. 3 Mile Island was totally unique. Because when 3 Mile Island happened, people didn't know what a nuclear meltdown was. So they went to the site. Instead of running away, they actually went to it to see what it looked like. Oh, I don't see nothing, George. It's probably okay. It doesn't work that way. The ultimate in stupid and ignorance, which was engineered socially, was social engineering, allowed people to be so complacent they actually went to the nuclear meltdown site. It's also the nuclear industry's worst nightmare. No, the nuclear industry's worst nightmare is James Lucett's music, I think. That's going to come back and haunt him eventually. The accident in Japan proves nuclear energy is not safe, and the industry can't prevent these things from happening. I bet you he got fired. I can't say that. You can't badmouth the nuclear industry. You do it today, you'll be like me. My video last night got 100 views. I should be thankful I got that many views. Pentagon spends $13 billion in nuclear warplane. Of course they do. Whatever they want, they'll spend. There's no limit. Nuclear industry calls up the government and says we need $50 billion. And they're like, we need a couple of new hammers. Like, oh, okay, we'll get you that right tomorrow morning. Is that okay? No, I want it right now. Nuclear industry is the death of everybody. Nuclear power is the death of everybody just from the emissions from the fuel pools. And at some point, the world will realize what I'm saying is true. And it's going to be too late, unfortunately. And I keep thinking my glasses are dirty, but they're scratched to shit. I'm very disappointed in that. I was out trying to do a noble thing, trying to do research. I covered like 50 miles off off-road on the big bike. And I spent yesterday trying to realign my back tire. Both of my rear nuts on the back wheel came loose on me. I didn't know it. I was coming down. I'd done 400 kilometers a couple of days back because I didn't do shows last week because I was busy doing research. And I put 400 kilometers, got caught in heavy rain. Man, that was so miserable. You have no idea. That was just... I got rain gear showed up today, finally. But I was so miserable. I can't explain it, how miserable it was. It was like almost 7 hours on the bike. And I'd never seen any birds, a few insects, no birds. We're at the biggest migratory spot on the entire planet. Over 100 ponds, maybe 150. Not a single fish jumping or a single bird in any of the ponds. It feels like the Twilight Zone every time I go and do field studies. And I'm an idiot because I'm still trying. So it's proof I'm stupid, right? But I don't know how not to try. I feel worthless if I don't try. I feel hopeless if I don't try. I feel hopeless when I get out there and see that there's nothing left too on you. But I feel hopeless if I don't try to do some field studies. The field studies to me are more important than I think anybody can appreciate or ever understand. I really don't think, well, there's a few of you out there actually do know the difference for sure, but the field studies to me are just to reinforce that I need to work harder, I need to be more articulated, I need to be more, produce more details, I need to dig deeper, I need to work harder. That's what the field studies do to me, right? The urgency of going out and seeing the species, all of missing, is just mind-blowing to me. It's heartbreaking. The Pentagon spends $13 billion on a nuclear warplane. Yeah, why not? We got that for $13 million. We spent it now. Don't worry, it grows on trees. We're the nuclear industry. We're the nuclear industry. It grows on trees. Huh. Huh. Ho, 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 ho. And I can't finish the field studies and do any field studies. I need to raise a lot of money to do it properly. But we need $600 or $700 in the next few days to get out there and do the huge amount. And I might be gone for a couple of weeks or even 3 weeks. I'll be back and forth, but in order to cover the terrain and the territory, the big problem I got is another big problem I got is I don't have a crash bar. And I don't know if you've ever been out in the woods on a motorcycle, but it's a little unnerving. You're afraid you're going to lose your foot because you always got to put your foot down. And it's miserable, right? It's just a miserable job. But you can cover a lot of terrain. And that tells the story. You're not going to find the oasis. I've already lived in that fantasy world for several years where, I'm going to find an oasis where all the species, and it should be like Gilligan Island, where everything is there, but it doesn't exist anymore. We don't live in that denial. It was denial the first couple of years, right? I knew the difference, but I just refused to accept it. Effort to replace his aging doomsday plane with a state-of-the-art airborne command center. It burns something like $1 million to $2 million worth of fuel a day. That's why they want you on electric cars, so they can have all the gas and diesel for themselves. Because they need it for the military machines, right? They just They just gobble up countries worth of diesel and gasoline every month, right? Designed to endure nuclear warfare and ensure continuous presidential command. What are you going to command? Like, if you're going to be up in a plane because you're setting off nuclear weapons, there's nothing to land down. When comes time to land, there's nowhere to land to, only some bunker that taxpayers unfortunately paid for so that these people can live in like royalty. The Flying Fortress' primary role is to ensure that the U.S. President and the military command and nobody else can maintain operations even if the ground is devastated by nuclear attacks. So even if your communities and your cities and your country is devastated, they can be in the plane saying, launch here and launch there. And in a million years, somebody will be happy because, it's a total ludicrousness to suggest that that's how the real world works. Yeah. Well, my views have been down for about 10 years before there was ad blockers. I appreciate it, though. Thank you. I hear what you're saying. But it doesn't matter. I'm going to do a show anyway because this is Sellafield again. Look. I got a better picture of Sellafield. Hang on here. I'll find it for you. My picture's real pretty. It's unique. There's Sellafield right there. Look. From a satellite picture, all you can see is farms as far as you can see. All those farms are brutally contaminated all day, every day, from perpetual emissions from 1,000 radioactive places at Sellafield. And the production of plutonium mixed oxide fuel, et cetera, right? The emissions from that process are catastrophic. And so if you're eating anything from those farms, and you probably did without knowing it, you'll eventually get sick from that. There's many illnesses and diseases. Every nuclear power plant looks like that. Because they love you so much. They ask so little. All they ask is that you get sick and fucking die. They're good people. The nuclear industry are the best humans. We're all scum. Should small modular reactors research be diverted to geothermal, because geothermal actually exists and small modular reactors don't? And why would you use small modular reactors when you have geothermal anyway? And James has put out a video, the Hanford handoff. I can't wait to see that. I can't wait to see it. Hey, don't forget to get your children. If you're in the United Kingdom, if you take all your children's teeth, your friends, neighbors' children, their teeth out, you can make a plutonium bomb. Just kidding. Don't do that. Just don't do that. It'll be the same thing for the killer whales. I mean, look at this whale. That doesn't give you the shivers. What will, I wonder? Nuclear industry caused that. Nuclear industry. Nobody's friend. All right, James got a new song out, the Hanford Handoff. I'm looking forward to that. And you don't have to look forward too much longer. We're at that moment. I do my shows at 10 p.m. my time. And so they usually end at midnight my time. And we're just getting back into the regular routine again for a little bit. Because I'm kind of limited to what I can do, right? Anybody wants to donate, you'll find the links in my description for PayPal. And it's right directly to my PayPal. You can't make a mistake. The Hanford Handoff. Now, James got quite a few songs there I still haven't played for everybody. And something about overdiagnosis. We played that before. I really liked it. The Nuclear Vantage was amazing. That was amazing, eh? Hateful Nuclear Wonderland. That was pretty amazing. Atom for what? He's getting so skilled at it now, and he does these different genres. And so he's really doing something unique. And he's the first person in history to ever do that stuff. Escapement Denied. That's what I was going to play tonight. And that is really good, folks. And so is Fukushima Playground. And he often has a link below his videos of why he done that specific song. Little Nuclear Johnny was an amazing song. The Cover and the Pump, we played that one too. That was an amazing song. And Sustainable is just... You got to listen to some of this stuff with headphones on to really appreciate how good it is. But tonight we're going to play, because I haven't heard it, you haven't heard it, so it's fair game for me. The Hanford Handoff. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. If you don't like me, give me a thumbs up. If you like me, give me a thumbs up. And we'll see you tomorrow night. I already got so many shows packaged, and I'm working every day on top of that, so... It's just I don't have what it takes to do all the shows. We just don't seem to find enough time. I still do the work. I just don't know how to not do the work. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the next one. You take care.
This is the handoff. Not triumph. Not future. Transfer without end. Inheritance unfinished.
Reels, families in rows. The story was progress. The outcome was plutonium. Wages turned the wheel. Workers saluted the flag. What they produced left behind tanks that endure beyond them.